Okay, I really don't want to do another update video because it is Saturday and I did an update video and then I just posted 8 videos, which I do every night links. So today is Saturday. It's roll time. What is it? The 13th, April 13th, 2019. So, but I was debating as I was uploading to do one more video just to kind of update everybody on kind of what happened earlier today. And then if I have it on, I'll try to do a few news things that I have skipped. Just stuff that should be spoken about. There's not a whole lot of media that's talking about that. I'll make this note. There is a new independent news site. Now I like it. It's on Facebook and it's called CNN Corpus Christi News Now. And I was not familiar with it. I ran across it, and they kind of seem like they do sometimes some of the stuff I do. If there's a particular, I'll mention the officer shooting, a recent one that I have not spoken on. And they're kind of hitting on those things. But let me start with the incident today. When I went to the park, Raven is just a friend of mine that I had problems with at one time. And I was real upset at Raven. Like I was looking for him one day. And it just wasn't a big thing, but it had to do with like a manipulative type thing. I didn't give a cigarette. I said, no, brother, I give too many away. Later I went to my motorcycle, which was parked at the park, and somebody put like a bunch of food. It looked like crap on the seat. It wasn't real bad, but I knew, oh, he must have done it, because my other friend, who's not here anymore, Caveman, Jammer, and I asked him, who walked? Did you see anybody walking over? So I was real mad. And sure enough, when I seen him one day up at Timmons, he could tell. And he kind of like just, backed off and left for a little while, came back. But over time, that just thing got to me. And some of the other guys knew. Like I said, man, that's chicken stuff to do that. But then I just forgave him. I said, well, I know that he's kind of a little different type of an individual on the journey. But the other thing is Raven, one time Sarge, who according to Raven was the one who assaulted Raven and gave him those pretty serious wounds. Now I don't know everything about the story, but I remember one time Sarge and Raven were going to get into it up at Timmons over whatever it was. I remember Sarge he's got that old time view and all, and I'm not saying it's not a correct view, but I remember he seemed to really peg, like, if you're a homosexual type thing. And I remember he said, because you're a homosexual. And I remember Raven said, I am not. But he talked today openly about, like, bisexual and things like that. And Raven's kind of paints his fingernails, and, there are people that have various things. So he kind of seemed that part of the violent thing that happened, it also had to do with maybe targeting him because of the, quote, gay bisexual guy. And Raven even brought up, he was quite angry when I got to the park because this incident just happened and he had to get the stitches. So it kind of fell into the category of possibly targeting somebody, and the anger was because they're gay. And I kind of saw some of that in the past. Now that makes it a little more serious to me, because the last few days I've had discussions with more than one person. And I hold to the conservative Christian view, which means homosexuality, according to Scripture, is a sin. And I hold to that view because of the Scriptures. Now, I'm also familiar that today I had a discussion with somebody else, not up there, and they were asking me again about this thing. They said, now, there are what we refer to as real liberal theologians, teachers, Bible people. And I said, they get around certain of those verses various ways. And some say, well, those references are just talking about outside of marriage, meaning if two people of the same sex get married, they're not referring to that. Okay, that's the very liberal view. I don't hold to that view. But I was telling this other person there was even a denomination started. I studied the history of movements and all. And one was started, and there's one church in Corpus Christi. I've never been to it. It's called the Metropolitan Community Church. And this movement, when I taught on it years ago, I forget everything now, but it was started by a person that said we want to just start churches that will reach out to the gay community and accept them and let them come as couples and so forth. That's not been my view. That's not my view. But my view has always been, first, as Christians. I remember my friend Trouble or Austin one time asked me, but John, a certain thing, because there are different people that say we're Christians and we're gay and this and that, and it confused some of the people in general. And I said, well, I told my friend Austin, I said, you're right. It's not right, according to Scripture, according to the Word of God, for there to be same-sexual sex type relationships. I said, and we love people, and if people in their life have all types of issues they're dealing with, we are honest with them, and we love them, and we speak the truth in love. And then the other issue was, we certainly, as a society, we don't target people for anything. And it might seem easier, to target people because of a particular, we disagree with the lifestyle or whatever. And we should have no violence on people for any reason, unless it's a self-defense thing. So when I first went up there and I saw my friend Raven in that condition, those of you who see this video on YouTube in a few minutes, you'll see the picture I posted on Facebook of the injury. Now I also have other friends that there was confusion about the thing. And the only thing I'll mention is I waited until I heard a few things. It seemed like kind of happened. Maybe he did something earlier that, they felt that caused it to happen. But as I was going up in the afternoon to see who's around, Sarge is sitting out there with my friend George, where he always sits. And then I went to the park, and sure enough, Raven was still at the park. I told him, I just passed up Sarge. I said, he's sitting over there. He said, you mean he's still out? The guy that did this to me is still out? And Raven said he gave a report to the police, said what Sarge looked like, and he does look like a military guy with the combat boots and the whole thing. And he, and I just wondered, because Raven even said that he understands that the way the PD has dealt with the violence on the street between people that are in those lifestyles. The lifestyles of being on the street, lifestyles, some have alcohol problems, some have drug problems. For the most part, the way the local police have dealt with that, and I'm familiar with this, is it's sort of like more of a hands-off attitude. I've heard the police chief almost mention things like that when I hear him on talk radio or whatever. Like, they've kind of chosen a certain life. And so Raven said, I'm familiar that they have the attitude, John. He said, but now whether they looked into it, I'm not here to report anybody. But it did kind of concern me somewhat, because I've seen sort of like, if something is severe enough, and those injuries were fairly severe, you can't wait till somebody kills somebody. And it doesn't look like they even looked for Sarge or talk. He's out there in the open. He was flying a sign, asking for money the other day. And so it just, that kind of... Now, the other issue that I didn't speak with, there'll be a few more local things I'll do right now. A few weeks ago, there was a shooting. And normally I talk about these as soon as they happen. And there was a robbery, sort of like on the west side of town. And so the cops rightfully were out looking for the two suspects. And what happened was, at first the news reported that one of the suspects was shot by the cops. And then it came out that what really happened in that case is the person wasn't the suspect. He was on his property in that area where they were looking for the suspects, and he was sleeping outside on the couch. I lay on the couch on my property quite often. I was just out there a little while ago. So he was on his own property on the couch. And the two officers, a male and a female, I forget the names. The girl was like a rookie, I guess. She's still, just first year in. The other officer, I forget his name, but he was a 7-year veteran on the CCPD. So they went up to him on the couch, and he was sleeping. You got to remember this now, on his property. And they woke him up. Take your hands out of your pocket. Now, if you're in a dead sleep and you wake up on your property and you see two officers, you're a little bit confused. And so when he took his hands out of his pockets, the media said he had a lighter, and one of those lighters that looks like a torch lighter, maybe like a gun. And initially they said the officer kind of shot him, and I heard the chief or someone say, he's going to be okay and all, but then later it was he got shot 4 or 5 times. Had surgery for his colon, and so basically he almost got killed. And it was a mistaken identity, but it was also a situation where, the person was sleeping on his own property. I understand when you're looking for a suspect, you don't need a warrant to get it, you're looking. And it's not, something like that to me is not just, maybe a mistake was made, maybe the officer, I'm sure the police chief in the city will argue the officer was justified but the same officer killed somebody on the line of duty in less than a year, I believe, previously. Now, I guess that killing was cleared, however that happened, but it also makes you think that some people might not have the temperament and to resort to that use of the weapon. Gun violence is a problem throughout the country. And we have to really have something that, to me, that, because it's a second shooting, and the way it happened, and the officer shot at him 5 times, hit him 4 times, he had his colon, it says there's surgery for that and all that. And I heard Mr. Markle, the police chief, on Bob Jones' talk show, called him a few minutes the other day. And they just mentioned it real quick, and, Chief said, we're going to, our guys deal with things in the field and all. And then the talk radio host, Bob Jones, who I believe is a minister, black brother, said, and I'm sure the city will wind up getting sued. I don't like the light attitude of, if my kid, I think he's 22-year-old, his mom went to the store, was going to bring him back something. When she got back, they realized, what happened? Oh, your son, he's in the hospital, whether he's going to live or not. Like, what? And he still didn't know what happened when his mom went to see him. Like, what were they there for? And he had to learn the story later. To me, that is definitely the cause of a dismissal of an officer. Now, whether the DA, and I believe he will look at it, but the media kind of did a blackout on that. And I noticed that some of the cases that are kind of problematic, the media now has decided to kind of not cover. And there have been a few other deaths that took place, and I didn't see anything on some of those people that my friends knew. And I'll end with this one because this is a little more serious than the local community or media have mentioned. I did a few videos on, there were 2 OBGYN doctors facing sex assault charges. Now the second one is still going to have to go through, he's going to be, I guess was indicted, he's going to have a trial, and it's very serious. The patients claimed, he touched me in a sexual manner or something of that nature, and he's an OBGYN, I forget his name. But you had the first one, which really kind of is somewhat of a pretty infamous the way it was dealt with. The first doctor, Jaime Sandoval, came out in the media. 3 or 4 women said, yes, he touched me inappropriately or something of that nature. And then when they filed the charges, it came out that the police reports actually didn't contain the actual charges, meaning the women didn't make the statements that the charges were for. A felony type of sex assault didn't fit what some of the women had said. So in the actual charging document, the cops make the report, they hand it over to the DA convened a grand jury and indicted this doctor. None of that in that initial thing should have happened, because what the lawyer did, Terry Shamsi, for the Dr. Jaime Sandoval, when they start, and now he was in jail for quite some time, I think he just got out, and I'll get to the rest of his case, but then they went before the judge and said, actually, there is no, the woman in this first one is not claiming what they're now charging him for, which was a felony sexual assault. And then they looked at it, and the judge agreed. I think it was Missy Medary. So the first one got thrown out. Then the same thing happened with the second one. Now, as this was going before the courts, they were like, how could you convene a grand jury? That's to do with just a tremendous amount of dysfunction here. Because the judge said, how could you have convened the grand jury and gotten these indictments? And the defense, Terry Shamsi, just wanted to get the guy off. That's his job. So he was kind of like saying, well, we're not, it was a mistake. But the judge said, this is like incompetence at a level that's pretty disastrous. And then lo and behold, the third one, they determined she was lying. Okay, why is this real serious? Initially, this man had a practice here in Corpus Christi, Jaime Sandoval. I guess he was quite successful, like this other OBGYN doctor. And as all this came out in the media, you know, most people think, oh, he's guilty. That's the normal reaction. And during this whole thing, holding him, you're treating him like you're no professional. Forget about your career, sir. You're like trash. That's how I felt they treated this doctor. Then one day, out of anger, I guess, he saw one of the DAs or prosecutors there by the courthouse, and he rammed his vehicle into him. Now, that was wrong to do. And that prosecutor that works for the DA's office, Mark Gonzalez, wrote the number down, driver's license. Oh, sure enough, it was him. Well, we're going to get you for that, too. Eventually, this doctor, he had that thing on the device on the leg, you know, if you got to be on house arrest or you can't come. He fled the country to his original homeland of wherever, Peru or somewhere, you know, down past Mexico. I guess he just decided, I got to get out of this place. Now, that certainly would make you look real guilty. And then there was a warrant, and that's like a federal thing. They got to go down. If it wasn't local cops that got him, and they had to extradite. So now you have like an international manhunt for this sex doctor. This could have been like, you know, these investigative shows. And he's out and he's running into, and then they apprehended him. They brought him back to Houston, Harris County. The reason they did that, I think, is they couldn't really trust, because he fled from Nueces County, Corpus Christi, when this man, this is quite big, money and Telenol. And then all in all, when it was all over, a lot of this was just incompetence, because all of those were dropped. Now, I'm sure this doctor wants to leave. I'm sure his business is done. I don't know if he's married. I'm sure he just wants to get the hell out. He can't. This criminal doctor now will serve 2 years probation in Nueces County for his reckless attack with his vehicle on one of the prosecutors. Now you have him stuck here. Now you have him, and if he dares leave, another manhunt will ensue. You fled probation, Mr. Sandoval? Peru. Let's get away. Now, all of this started with gross incompetence at a level that you could have national people look at that and say, what's going on in your city? That's why the local media didn't cover it. You're not just talking about a few accusations. This causes me to question about the next OBGYN guy, because a lot of his former patients are saying, this man has been our doctor for years. It raises the level. I don't, you know, if you're doing a pelvic examination on a woman, and even if there's another female there and you're an OBGYN doctor, all it takes is for the woman to say, I think when he did the exam, in my mind, he looked at me or touched me sexually. I believe it opens the door. And I know that a lot of our local people that mean well for our community, are not realizing that's why they pretty much just, I think KIII TV, a few media things did a real short thing on the, conclusion of, quote, the sex doctor. That's how I titled it a few minutes. That's a big thing. That's a big thing to me. To me, it was kind of a big thing that I saw Sarge sitting right there outside today. And this is nothing against Sarge. I had a little disagreement with him like I did with Raven. And whatever they happen to... I don't think it's proper to have a policy in any community that says if people are in a lifestyle of crime and they do things to one another, we pretty much have hands off on that. I don't think that's proper. I think meaning if just because these guys have been on the streets and if they do things to each other, no. Most of them don't want to report the things, but it was reported because they did ask Raven for the identification of Sarge. So I wanted to do that. I'm not justifying sin. But because this came up a few times, and then also at the same time, I heard the statement in the past, like, because you're a homosexual. I remember he yelled that once at Raven, and Raven denied it because he says, I guess he claims bisexual or whatever. But he seemed to think that had to do something with it. And for the most part, we had a very infamous case of Jesse Smollett, a particular actor on the show I never watched in my life, never will, out of Chicago. And for the most part, most of you that watch the news, he kind of faked a hate crime attack upon himself out of Chicago. And the story initially came out, this black, openly gay actor said these two white men, MAGA hats, Trump people, they attacked me, they had the news, and they poured bleach and all. And pretty much it came out, he hired his two bodyguards to kind of do this. Now I know how he tried to wiggle out of it, which he pretty much almost did. They had enough evidence, and the cops investigated it at Chicago. Look, it was faked. He faked it with the bodyguards. But then, I guess because he had the lawyers, eventually they wrongfully dropped everything against him because Jesse Smollett didn't have to give any admission of guilt. So when they dropped the case, the DA out of that area of Chicago, whichever her name was, when they dropped the case, look, it got the local police mad. They spent a lot of money, and even the famous Democratic mayor, Rahm Emanuel, who worked for Obama and all, even he was upset. Because you shouldn't fake a thing like that and just get off. Because the tensions of real hate crimes that take place. And even the police chief out of that area is black, and he was mad too. But they kind of had connections that got the charges dropped, but they got him dropped in a way that in the media he kept claiming his innocence. And I could read between the lines. They basically, the police and city, I'm sure, were saying, we have enough evidence that you sent these guys a check. They admitted you were in on it with them. And maybe his position was going to be, oh, maybe they're the ones that did the hate crime. You see, so he was going to basically screw his own friends that he hired to do the hate crime, blame it on them. All right. All of that's ridiculous that they did that, the way it was handled. But look, if you have some people on the street telling other people, because you're a homosexual, we're going to get you and beat you. And I've heard those kinds of statements. And then to know that something of that nature happened, though there's questions about who initiated, and then to know that some of them said, brought it up and said, John, that's a hate crime. Because he also mentioned that multiple times in the past. Because you're gay, because you're homosexual, because you deserve to get your ass whipped or whatever. Now look, no matter how behind the times this city is, if there's killings, shootings, murders, and if they take place among people that have been in those lifestyles, these things should be fully investigated. Because there's a lot of damn money that we pay. I had a few instances I didn't mention, but if I'm with some homeless friends, even doing ministry, even oftentimes, a few times officers will stop. And if there's, my friend George throws beer cans down, which is wrong. And if the cops come up, if I'm there, or if Terry, one of the other ladies, they will just say to everybody, you got to clean everything up now. Now, when that happened last time, I was on my way out. I had my car in the parking lot. I wasn't at the park. I was at like a restaurant. The officer said, no, you got to clean up this parking lot. I said, look, I'm going to my car. And George was like, no, it's my mess. I'll clean it up. But that happened a few weeks ago, where one of my lady friends, she was not making the mess, and they told her to clean up this whole area. Now, I understand that they get upset that certain homeless people leave a mess, and some of my other friends don't like that they do that. But you got to have, you can't just go up to a citizen. If I was in front of my house right now and just pull up and say, clean this curb. And some of them are doing that to people that are not littering or whatever. I think that the shooting of this last person, the way it happened on his residence, and that officer had killed somebody within a year earlier, shows his penchant for pulling out that revolver, that weapon, whatever they use now. That's got to be a very last resort that you do. If you see somebody, I have instances on the street, I don't carry a weapon. But if I was so skittish that Sarge, somebody told me once, Sarge pulled out a .45. Now maybe I believe that story. But I don't go up and, does he have one? Because he always carries a case. Or does this guy carry a gun? And if you're walking around with a gun, whether you be an officer or whoever, and you have the mentality that I have to shoot or I'm going to, no, that's going to be the last thing. The last thing you resort to is lethal, deadly force. And I understand that Mr. Markle and others said, well, we can't second guess, it's later, But look, I looked at that. If it was a girl, it just so happened he's Hispanic and I think he had some tattoos, which seems to make it more acceptable in the community. But if it was your beautiful 22-year-old daughter, if Mr. McComb or any of you have a wonderful 22 or 23-year-old Anglo non-tattooed daughter, and you came home and said, what happened? I don't know, I woke up and the cop shot me 5 times, hit me 4, colon severed. Oh, it's... All right. So I figured I'd do the update because I hit on a few issues. It's not to go after this one or that one or the other one, or to say, report this, report that. If these people are doing that, these people are doing that. I just found it a little kind of strange that even after you have an assault of that manner, that same person, within less than 12 hours, is still out. I don't think they looked for him or cared about looking for him, to be honest with you. But then the problem becomes, then say if the next step is one of the guys kills each other. Oh, well, then we have another homicide. I have a friend of mine that said there have been a few deaths in this last year, he said, of homeless people, different ones. And some of those were just kind of like swept under the rug. All right, so tomorrow I will not be teaching a Sunday sermon video, as far as I know, and I do repost, the Sunday sermons that you see every Sunday. And I'm grateful for the Flickr site. Look, I just was on sharing some of those sites get a lot of views before you share. I just say that's not a whole lot, but a lot more than maybe. So that's a blessing. You do see some that are like repeats and all. And so those of you that did not see the picture of my friend Raven, who had pretty severe, looks like his jugular was almost cut, I would say go to my Facebook page and you can see that picture, all right? God bless everybody, and I'm not sure when we'll make a live talk like this again. I slowed down on a lot of these, so that's why I wanted to hit those few cases. I wanted to hit them because I noticed the local media didn't want to cover that. You could have done an entire expose on, quote, the sex doctor, how that was handled, and now that doctor cannot leave. I'm sure he wants to get the hell out of Texas and go back to wherever he was. But now, you're going to be like the jumpsuit man, Mr. Doctor, Mr. Sandoval. You can show up, report, and whether he ever gets out. That's, to me, the level of incompetence in that one example. The level, that wasn't an example of simply legitimate, complaints that were made no, it was an example of incompetence. That even in the reports, the women didn't make certain accusations, but yet they were handed over to the DA as such as felony accusations. DA can bring the grand jury. Yes, then we went and did a manhunt when he fled, and all of that was simply because they didn't read the report. If you want to be progressive, Mr. Gonzalez, it also has to do with competence. It has to do with all of the departments, whether it's SO, PD, whether if you want competence. You want not to flippantly say, well, I'm sure this guy's going to sue. Sue, thank God he didn't get murdered. Sue, we want that looked at. We want that looked at just like if it was the daughter of the mayor or the daughter of some white person in authority that was shot 4 times, the colon severed, treated it the same way, regardless if he's a Hispanic kid with tattoos or a white girl with no tattoos. Okay. That's it. God bless everybody.